So, hi, my name is Silvana. I will be presenting on the dynamics and affects of queer Latinidad in Vida. I am a second year PhD student in the comparative literature department. So I'll be doing my project on a show called Vida and its relationship to concepts of Latinidad, that is being and or appearing Latinx as a fixed and pre-existing identity. As you can see, these are some of the only main Latinx cast series that have been published over the years, and they're all pretty homogenous in productions, and none of them have a queer main character narrative as the plotline. While most cultural productions featuring Latinx characters and plotlines follow this categorical definition of Latinidad, Stars' release of Vida is an aberration to this norm because the series confounds identity categories that dominant culture often prescribes to Latinidad. Yet, while Vida's self-proclaimed queer brown narrative tagline acknowledges the importance of representation, the narrative also recognizes visibility in terms of identity to be the beginning and at the end of the struggle for liberation. While advocating a queer brown narrative, Vida simultaneously leverages partly the singular categorical plasticity through the Latinx characters' non-conventional social and moral behaviors. The series is able to play with the limits of malleability through implementing issues of language, specifically through the usage of Spanglish, and with issues of colorism. By playing with what constitutes as this queer brown narrative, Vida not only highlights the utility of identity categories and the need to deconstruct them, but also delineates the possibility for new societal and personal productions that are not exclusively endemic to constructed categories of the self. These new productions can be seen through physical spaces on the show that not only challenge the singularity and restrictions of identity categories, but also allows the creation of new productions through the potentials of affect. Identity as a construct privileges sameness over difference and thus is far from neutral. Over time, the process of normalization has marked these constructions as default. Complicating this issue of identity forms of belonging allows Vida to show how identity can be as restrictive as it can be pragmatic, and that the key is to see the intricate ways the subject negotiates these intersecting forces. Before we get into the rest of the presentation, I'm going to give a brief plot overview of the first season of Vida. So the series follows sisters Linda and Emma Hernandez as they travel back to their childhood neighborhood of Boyle Heights in LA for their mother Vidalia's funeral in the midst of gentrification by well-to-do Latinos who are mostly white or light-skinned. Vidalia's death has left the sisters the family bar called La Chinita, as well as their new stepmom Eddie, who is Vidalia's late wife. Eddie's character comes as a shock to Emma, who was kicked out by her mom in her teen years after she found out Emma was gay. So I use a queer studies methodology because in order to recognize the implications the colonial project has left on questions of identity and its relationship to sexuality, a queer studies framework is apt since it denaturalizes the relationship between the self, home, family, and nation. Further, the excess of categories in Vida's characters challenges the show's queer brown narrative tagline because it moves across constructed geographic, linguistic, and imaginary borders of belonging and identification. Breaking away from these constructions allows the excesses to refuse singularity, as this cannot house the characters' multiplicities which manifest themselves through the new productions Vida creates, such as the significance of spaces on the show, like the bar that the sisters inherited from their mother. So, for example, in one of the scenes that I will show now, here we see Emma, the main character, who tries to be with her childhood crush named Cruz. However, she is unable to, and she flees after and goes past the bar. I'll show the clip, and it also has captions, so. Here, as you can see, not only is Emma visually disturbed by the presence of the bar, as she does not initially go in, but she is consciously and unconsciously discouraged from being with Cruz as a result of her past experiences with her mom, Vidalia, who manifests herself as the little girl who we saw in the scene. In the series, she acts as a ghost, and actually she comes back in season 3, which is another paper that I'm writing about. I use sexual gestures to analyze this scene and a lot of the project that I'm working on because in Sexual Features, Queer Gestures, and Other Latino Longis, Rodriguez argues that while gestures signal the potentiality of our body, they also make public the imprints of our past. In this manner, sexual gestures contain excesses that have the potential to destabilize or coalesce what one knows about the self and other selves. These gestures can stem from previous codes of signification that reveal how memory and feelings are performed and embodied through bodily practices. For example, in this scene, codes of signification can manifest in physical spaces such as the bar, whose historical past prohibits Emma from solely situating the space as that of refuge. Growing up, the bar and the way her mom ran it was not a safe space for a queer kid. Therefore, after Emma was kicked out and her mother started living an openly queer life, the bar turned into an LGBTQ plus safe space, one which present Emma still holds a complicated relationship with. Here, Emma's sexual performance or inability to perform shows the intricate and complex implications of physical spaces that are often tied to invisibility constraints. The ways in which Vidalia policed her body in relationship to Cruz shapes Emma's gestures with Cruz. Emma's Queer Latinidad reveals contradictory understandings of gestures or sex acts that are temporally and spatially effective, specifically how some sex acts can be emancipatory, Emma seen with Tigre, or both liberatory and restrictive, Emma seen with Cruz. Earlier scenes in the series demonstrate more fully liberatory sex scenes she has with other partners, which coupled with the one we just saw illustrates a nuanced take on sexual gestures. This is represented in Emma's physical breakdown when she attempts to have sex with Cruz and when she is unable to initially enter the physical building of the bar after she leaves her apartment. Coupled with the ghost of Vidalia, the space of the bar is a manifestation of histories embodied by both Emma and Vidalia, which continues to confound Emma's subjectivity. In this manner, Vida shows forms of understanding and belonging as nonlinear that are impacted by both visible and invisible social and historical conditions. This nonlinearity enables one to understand the conflicting responses sex has on the self. Through this analysis, Vida specifically highlights the stakes it has for racialized bodies whose same-sex desires, whether emancipatory, restrictive, or both, are inextricable from longer histories of sexual repression. Further, using gestures as a form of communication to create mutual pressure permits the possibility of leaving the here and now to formulate new modes of collective sociality. This potentiality becomes present when Emma produces effective and political forms of sexual gestures as she attempts to have sex with Cruz, but is unintentionally deterred by the memory of the trauma and pain inflicted by her ironically homophobic mother. is more than just a physical space. The bar also embodies a place that hosts and embraces the character's multiplicities, where different forms of exchanges can take place. Yet the bar also does not ignore histories of social damage, as it actively deals with this in different ways. Whether through the usage of the specter or the negative to repurpose feelings that are read as static, the bar exists as a multifaceted entity where the exchanges taking place represents the potentiality behind the unstructured potential of affect. The ghost of Idalia that haunts Emma demonstrates how visual representations of bodily desires negotiate between the past, present, and future, and displays the affective and political forms of sexual gestures, which open up a space with the potentiality for new collective socialities. In doing so, Vida displays how racialized bodies use the negative to reproduce different meanings and interpretations of identification and belonging. In this manner, Vida begins to represent how affect is connected to our subjectivity. The feelings characters like Emma experience are inextricably tied to affective responses for which one does not have the language to express. Specifically, Emma's queer bodily desires are negatively, queer bodily desires demonstrate how bodies that are negatively racialized and deemed as sexual deviants cannot solely rely on strategies implemented in the present to fight institutional structures. Emma finds herself at a crossroads where she has to reconcile her multi-layered being to the expectations of Latinidad or even queer Latinidad. While Emma is not allowed to show her full being in dominant society, certain spaces on the show let her envision the could-be of her desires, such as through the significance of the bar. The dynamic plot development in Vida challenges and confounds Latinidad as a fixed and pre-existing category, which allows Vida's characters to collectively assemble new spaces in an attempt to delineate a life where their whole is equally allowed to exist.